the womb of uNomkhubulwane. And the urgency, of course, while we celebrate ourselves and we're being celebrated as fathers, the urgency to be recreated and to be made anew. And so this really stems out of what has now become a 5-piece meditation that really uses the themes of uNomkhubulwane to locate the various messages and texts surrounding uNomkhubulwane as this mythical rain goddess. But also starting with the question of a myth, what makes a myth is discourse, and what sort of discourses are we having around uNomkhubulwane? So the first of these movements was done on the other side of the Atlantic, where I was really looking at collective memory, a collective black memory to be specific, and thinking, of course, about displacement and the issue of the erasure in a sense of linguicide, in a sense of epistemicide, and all of these kind of deaths that we have to account for that leads to this moment of what Fanon has called subhuman or a non-being, and really looking at how that makes the process of attempting performance close to impossible. And that really thinks through black biographies and all of these catastrophes, and thinking about his Nyembezi uNomkhubulwane and what the Atlantic really represents in terms of the spirit of uNomkhubulwane. Some of the stories that kind of stood out for me were these moments of the refusal, and also refusing to fall anyway. So these refusals comes at really many levels. And so because we practice what we call jazz now, I wanted to locate this notion of jazzing and jazziness as a way of connecting jazz with ancient African memory. And so, of course, a couple of things happen when we try to do that. We think about what happens when you are displaced, the violence of displacement, but also in the moment of displacement, the necessity to kind of hold on to the very glimpse of what could be remembered about who you are, where you come from, when the language is banned, when your entire worldview is banned. So jazz really becomes a protest. And then the next movement was in Cape Town, which was called Izibingelelo zikaNomkhubulwane. Then formulating a kind of language, kaNomkhubulwane, using water as a way to think about the womb, but also to think about creation. And the need to rehearse this being created. That is not a once-off moment. We are constantly rehearsing this being. And some of these things that trouble us in society, of course, is our own difficulty and flexibility to be recreated. And uNomkhubulwane is always this space that's inviting us, ukuzalwa kabusha, which of course was stolen by other people and kind of rephrased. And then we followed with this Lilos kaNomkhubulwane. This really locates ancient Kemetic knowledge around the knowledge of our set, and this moment of the sun kind of departing from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere that leaves uNomkhubulwane in this constant lament. Isililo sikaNomkhubulwane. But what does isililo sikaNomkhubulwane really mean? Ilanga, God the sun is departing and uNomkhubulwane uyakhala. And also remember, when uNomkhubulwane is created, it's the first time we really are introduced to the concept of gender. Because our God, the creator, uMvelikqala, is genderless. There was no explicit kind of signifying of gender. So the first time we encounter gender is through a mother, uNomkhubulwane, who is understood to be God's only daughter. And then, of course, we followed with Izlogothos kaNomkhubulwane. Izlogothos kaNomkhubulwane was looking at the messages that uNomkhubulwane is giving to us currently. Uthini uNomkhubulwane, what is her language? And the last one is this one, which is umgidi kaNomkhubulwane. How do we honor uNomkhubulwane? And I think it's important to stop talking about fathers for a moment and talk about uNomkhubulwane. In Letters from the Underworlds, I was proposing this idea of being recreated. I think it was the spirit of Ndu. What does it mean for man to be recreated against the backdrop of course, these problems and catastrophes, how they impacted on man, but by extension, how they produce this kind of aggression that we can think of in the context of gender-based violence. How do we deal with those in the context of uNomkhubulwane? Siyokhala kuNomkhubulwane sizalwe kabusha. And so those are really the inherent messages. And thank you for coming to this space, because what we're trying to do is to create a ritual for fathers to kind of immerse ourselves in the spirit and the waters. Sihlanzeke uNomkhubulwane. Thank you so much.
uNomkhubulwane.